The rain hammered Chicago's skyline, like it wanted to wash the whole city clean. Inside the 42nd floor Cole Enterprises, a dozen executives shouted over each other while red alerts flashed on giant screens. A 50 million Korean contract was falling apart in real time. One translation error had turned a respectful business deal into a national insult. Then the elevator doors opened. A young black man stepped out, soaked from the storm, a small delivery bag clutched in his trembling hands. He paused at the glass entrance, reading the gold letters. Richard Cole, CEO. His name was Malik Carter, 20 years old, delivery driver by day, college dropout by force, son of a dying mother who needed one last round of medicine. Excuse me, Malik said softly. I have a delivery for Mr. Cole. Heads turned. One executive muttered, "Can't you see we're in a crisis?" Another laughed. "DoorDash can't fix this one, kid." The room erupted in mocking chuckles. Richard Cole, a white billionaire with silver hair and the smirk of a man used obedience, turned toward Malik. "Unless that bag has a miracle inside, boy, you're in the wrong building." Malik didn't flinch. "I just wanted to drop this off and ask something. I need $3,000 for my mother's medicine. She's running out of time." The laughter returned, louder this time. Phones rose. Someone whispered, "He's serious." Richard leaned back in his chair, eyes gleaming with arrogance. "3,000? For your mother? Tell you what, why don't you fix a mistake my Ivy League team couldn't? You solve it, I'll pay you your charity." "Deal." The floor went silent for a second. Malik's soaked shoes squeaked as he stepped forward. "Deal." He set the delivery bag down beside the computers and walked toward the giant screen filled with Korean characters. Every mocking eye followed him, expecting failure, craving amusement. No one knew that the boy they were laughing at was about to destroy everything they thought they understood about power, race, and respect. If this already made your blood boil, hit like and subscribe right now, because stories like this are still happening, and the world needs to hear them. Malik's fingers hovered over the keyboard, but his mind wasn't in that office yet. It was back home, in a dim apartment 2 bus rides away, where his mother Keisha Carter sat by the window, her skin pale from chemotherapy, smiling weakly each time her son brought dinner home. He could still hear her voice that morning. "Don't you worry about me, baby. You just keep working hard. God sees everything." He had nodded, hiding the truth that the hospital had stopped her treatment until they paid the next bill. $3,000. Exactly what he was asking for. Back in the CEO's glass palace, the storm outside echoed the chaos inside. Executives still argued about contracts, pride drowning reason. Malik quietly studied the documents flashing on the screen. Lines of Korean text. Wrong tone. Wrong phrasing. A single misplaced word that changed partnership into submission. He whispered. That's what made them angry. A few nearby execs frowned. "What did you say?" Before he could answer, Richard Cole's voice cut through the noise. "Hey, genius, you still here? You know Korean, or you just pretending?" Malik looked him in the eye. "I learned it from my father. He was a translator before he passed." Richard smirked. "Touching. So what's the plan, Professor Carter?" "Want to impress us." "I can fix it," Malik replied. "But if I do, you keep your word." Laughter again, sharp as glass. Richard raised a hand, silencing the room. "Fine. You got 1 hour. Boy, if you fail, you walk out that front door and never come back. In fact, I'll have security escort you with a nice photo for the press. Sound fair?" Malik nodded once. "Fair." He sat down at an unused terminal in the corner, wiping rain from his jacket, and started typing. The laughter didn't stop. It just moved behind his back. But what no one in that office knew was that Malik wasn't just typing words. He was rewriting the meaning of respect itself. The clock on the wall ticked louder than the thunder outside. Malik typed with steady fingers, his reflection faintly visible on the glass wall beside him. Executives leaned against desks, whispering bets about how long it would take before he broke down. Richard Cole crossed his arms. 10 minutes, he said smugly. Then we'll have the janitor escort our translator back to the street. Laughter rippled through the room again, but Malik didn't look up. His eyes scanned every line of Korean text, recognizing the nuance immediately. The system had used a machine translation model that flattened formal expressions, something his late father, David Carter, used to warn about. He whispered to himself, "You can't automate respect." With quiet precision, Malik rewrote entire sections, replacing robotic phrases with culturally accurate ones. The tone shifted from commanding to cooperative. Even the AI's cold syntax began to read like real conversation. 5 minutes passed, then 10, then 20. The laughter started to fade. "Wait," said one of the younger analysts. "He's actually correcting things that took our team weeks." Another leaned closer. "How does he even know business Korean?" Malik kept working. The glow of the monitor lit his face. Calm, focused, unshaken. He adjusted the honorific levels, corrected idioms, and flagged corporate slang that disrespected the Korean partners. He wasn't just fixing language. He was fixing arrogance. Richard finally snapped, stepping forward. "Enough. You think changing a few words will save a deal worth $50 million. Malik turned slowly, meeting his gaze. "Sir, this isn't just a few words. This is why you lost 3 other contracts this year." The room froze. "What did you just say?" Richard demanded. Malik brought up old documents from the company's archives, each showing the same mistranslation pattern. "You've been addressing CEOs like interns. You don't tell a Korean executive what to do. You invite him to collaborate." The silence was suffocating. Even the storm seemed to pause. One executive whispered, "He's right. I remember that rejection email." Richard's jaw clenched. "Security," he barked. "Get him out here before." Malik raised his voice, calm but sharp. "I'm not done yet. You might want to see what else your system has been hiding." The guard stopped mid-step. The entire room leaned forward. For the first time, the billionaire didn't look amused. "If this happened right in front of you, what would you do? Tell me in the comments. I read every one. And if you want justice as much as I do, hit subscribe." The moment Malik spoke, every executive froze. The monitors behind him flickered as he opened a buried folder inside the company's old server, one no one had dared to touch since the merger years ago. Emails appeared on the giant screen. They were from David Carter, Malik's late father, dated 3 years back. Subject line: translation accuracy warnings, urgent cultural misinterpretations. Malik scrolled slowly, his voice steady. "These are messages my father sent to your company, warnings you ignored. He was a consultant who offered solutions for these very errors. You dismissed him because he wasn't from Harvard or Stanford, just a black freelancer trying to feed his family." The room went dead silent. Richard Cole's smirk finally cracked. "Where did you get those?" Malik turned toward him. "He copied me on every email." He said, "One day, son, they'll understand that knowledge doesn't need a title." He pressed enter. The corrected contract on the screen translated perfectly. At that exact moment, the phone on the desk rang. International call, flashing Seoul, South Korea. Richard hesitated but picked it up. A calm Korean voice spoke through the speaker. "Mr. Cole, we reviewed the new version. It's flawless. We'd like to continue our partnership and congratulate whoever translated it. This person understands respect." Everyone turned to Malik. He stood still, eyes bright but composed. Richard's throat tightened. That was him. "Then please, Mr. Cole," the voice said, "give that young man our regards and our offer. We'd like to hire him for our U.S. division." Gasps filled the room. Executives who'd mocked him minutes ago looked away, ashamed. Malik nodded politely. "Tell him thank you, sir. But before I go, you should also know something." He opened one more file, an internal finance report. "Your company didn't just ignore my father's warnings. You kept using the same system after it failed. You cost yourselves $87 million because you couldn't respect a man who tried to help." The sound of the storm outside was nothing compared to the silence that followed. Richard Cole had no words left, only the reflection of his own arrogance staring back at him through the glass. The next morning, Headlines exploded across every major business site. Black delivery boy saves $50 million deal. Billionaire CEO humiliated. The story spread faster than the storm that had soaked Malik the night before. Richard Cole's company stocks dropped 20% before noon. Reporters swarmed the lobby demanding answers. Inside his glass office, Richard sat in silence, staring at the same screen that once defined his power, now showing his downfall. Meanwhile, in a quiet apartment across the city, Keisha Carter woke up to the sound of her son's laughter for the first time in months. Malik held the phone to her ear so she could hear the Korean CEO's voice thanking her for raising the most brilliant translator I've ever met. Tears rolled down her cheeks. "So you got the job?" Malik smiled. "Better than that, Mom. They're paying for your full treatment." At the hospital, doctors couldn't believe the turnaround. The same boy who used to deliver takeout to pay bills was now handling international contracts for one of Asia's biggest corporations. But Malik didn't care about fame. He cared about justice. He gathered the old files his father had written, every ignored warning, every undervalued idea, and created a foundation in his memory, the David Carter Fund. Its purpose was simple: to train underprivileged black youth in language, business, and diplomacy, the same skills that once got his father dismissed. When the story hit the news, people across the country reacted. Some saw inspiration. Others saw guilt. But everyone saw the truth. Racism had cost a billionaire more than money. It had cost him his dignity. Reporters cornered Richard outside his building. "Mr. Cole, do you regret underestimating Malik Carter?" Richard paused and muttered, "More than you'll ever know." Across Chicago, Malik quietly walked his mother into her next chemo session. The nurses greeted her like a hero's mother. As the elevator doors closed, she looked up at her son and whispered, "Your father will be proud, baby. You turned their laughter into our hope." Malik squeezed her hand. "No, Mom, we did." The city lights outside flickered in the rain, not as a storm this time, but as a quiet promise of justice served. 6 months later, the skyline of Chicago looked different from the 47th floor of the Global Translation Alliance Tower. The company plaque at the reception read, "Regional Director Malik Carter." The same boy who once begged for $3,000 now managed international contracts worth hundreds of millions. And yet, nothing about him had changed. Same quiet tone, same humility, same love for his mother, who was now cancer-free. That morning, his assistant buzzed the intercom. "Sir, there's someone here asking to see you. He says his name is Richard Cole." Malik looked up from his laptop. For a moment, the name didn't sting. It just sounded distant, like something from another lifetime. "Send him in," he said calmly. The door opened slowly. Richard stepped inside, thinner, older, stripped of arrogance. His once impeccable suit now hung loose on his shoulders. He looked around the office, the polished glass, the view he once owned, and then at the young black man behind the desk. "Malik," he said softly, "I came to apologize for everything. I've lost the company. The board voted me out after the scandal. I don't blame them. I deserved it." Malik closed the laptop and leaned back in his chair. "Sit down, Richard." Richard hesitated. "Then Saturday, I'm not here for pity. I just wanted to ask if you have any work. I need to rebuild my life somehow. I'll take anything." Malik studied him for a long second, then smiled faintly. "You know, it's funny. I just approved a new position in our ethics communication department. Junior assistant, $60,000 a year." Richard blinked, the words catching in his throat. "Junior assistant?" Malik nodded. "You'd be helping translate documents. Learning how to treat people with respect. It's not glamorous, but it's honest work." The old billionaire exhaled, his eyes wet. "I'll take it. Maybe it's time I learn what humility really means." Malik extended his hand. "Welcome aboard, Richard." For the first time, the man who once laughed at him shook his hand with gratitude. Not power. In that handshake, years of prejudice, pain, and pride finally dissolved. As Richard left, Malik turned toward the window. The city spread beneath him. He whispered, almost to himself, "Sometimes God doesn't punish people. He teaches them. The conference hall was filled to capacity. On stage stood Malik Carter, dressed in a dark suit, speaking into the microphone beneath a banner that read, "The David Carter Foundation, translating hope." The audience was silent. Business leaders, journalists, and young black students whose lives the foundation had already begun to change. Malik smiled faintly as he looked toward the front row, where Keisha Carter sat, healthy, radiant, and proud. He took a deep breath and began. 3 years ago, I walked into an office just to deliver food. I walked out with my dignity restored, and a lesson that changed my life. The crowd leaned in. He continued, "My father used to say, the most powerful translation isn't between languages, it's between hearts, between arrogance and humility, between hate and understanding." Applause built slowly, spreading like a wave through the room. Malik's eyes softened as he noticed someone sitting quietly near the back, Richard Cole. No cameras focused on him, no spotlight. Just a man humbled by time, listening with his head bowed. Malik's voice warmed. "We all make mistakes, but redemption begins the moment we stop judging people by what they look like and start seeing what they've survived." Keisha wiped a tear as her son glanced at her. At the framed photo beside her, his father smiling in a simple suit. Malik raised his voice slightly, finishing his speech. "This foundation exists because one man's rejection couldn't kill another man's dream. My father believed respect is a language every human deserves. And today we finally speak it fluently." The audience rose to their feet, clapping until the hall echoed. Reporters captured every second, but Malik's eyes found only one moment worth keeping. Richard standing, clapping softly, tears in his eyes. As the applause faded, Malik whispered to himself, "Justice isn't revenge, it's peace with a purpose." He looked once more at his mother, alive, proud, free, and smiled. For the first time, he didn't feel like the delivery boy they once mocked. He felt like a man who had delivered something far greater. Truth. If you believe this should never happen again, share this now. And to my USA, UK, and Canadian viewers, your voice is power. Use it.